Hello, 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 everyone. I am always happy to be here sharing another week, another topic. My name is Quanisha Johnson. I'm a licensed therapist and a licensed educator. And I am going to be bringing session 2 of our series. And we are in the 4th series. And that series is fostering healthy relationships between Black men and Black women. So let's get it started and get the conversation going. And today, the topic that we are going to be talking about is so important. As I always say, all the topics are important. But our topic today is going to be the dance of communication. The dance of communication. And so I'll explain more of what I mean by the dance of communication. But today's conversation is all about communicating. How do we communicate in relationships? What does that look like? What are some things that we do that we could improve upon? And just some tools, some skills, and some strategies for healthy relationship dynamics. So important. And so what is communication? So today we're talking about the dance of communication. What exactly is it? So communication is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors. And I made sure to underline rather, process, and then the word exchanged. So when I think of process, I think of a step-by-step way of doing things. There's a process to everything. I get my hair colored, and so there's a process of getting my hair to be this color. It is not just a one-step thing. There's a process, step 1, step 2, step 3. So there's an order to it. And then when I think of the word exchange, I think of a back and forth. I think of things not being on one side. And so those are words I think are very important in the idea of communication. It's a process. So there's steps to it. There's an order to it. There's a way to do it. And there is an exchange, a back and forth. You do this, I do this. And we're saying here it's between individuals, and it's a common system, common. And so interestingly enough, if we think about, verbal communication, and if you spoke, a language that I didn't speak, and we would have some sort of communication breakdown or issue understanding one another. So if I am speaking one language, or I create a symbol that represents this language, and you know it too, there's an understanding. So I gave that example to say that with communication, there's a commonality, and so we need to be on one accord. We don't need to agree about everything, but be on one accord in the idea that it's a process and there's an exchange. Communication is also the foundation of all relationships. It is our connector. How will we connect without communication? And when we're saying communication is symbols, signs, behaviors, there was a time where, about language has evolved so much. Even think about slang and the words and things that we say that represent something else. So language has evolved, communication has evolved, but it is our connector, how we communicate with one another, those symbols, those signs, those behaviors. It is our connector. So communication is so important. It's the foundation of our relationship. So what does communication involve? Communication involves the exchange of a message. So when I want to communicate with someone, I need to give them a message. And then in return, my expectation may be that they let me know in some way that they receive the message, that they understand the message, that they heard the message. And so there's once again that word exchange. There is some sort of message. And then I have here, communication involves intentional listening and clear expression. So when you step up to the communication table, and we're not talking literally about a table, but you have to have an intent when I'm communicating with someone. I need to be intentional about listening. So I need to make a concerted effort to listen. That means I am paying attention to what's distracting me. I'm making sure that there aren't distractions. The perfect example now, too, is with our cell phones. And so often we are communicating, and someone may be on their cell phones and thinking in their mind they're multitasking. They're listening and then they're doing something on their phones. But we have to be intentional. And that means that there are distractions around, that maybe when someone's speaking to us or trying to communicate something, that we're making sure that just for those minutes that we're communicating verbally, that we put that cell phone down. We can get back to it, but we'll put it down because we want to be intentional. We want to come to that communication table with the idea and intent to understand, to listen. Then on the other hand of it, we want to, when we need to communicate information or give a message, we want to be as clear as possible. I know not everyone always understands where we're coming from. It may not get us in what we're communicating, but we want to, as much as possible, attempt to clearly express ourselves, to be clear in your expression. So that means before you're communicating a message, you know what you want to say and need to say. You know what that is. If you don't understand it, you can't give it to somebody else. Oftentimes in therapy, I talk to my clients about when they're needing something or wanting something from someone, and they say, I did not receive this thing from this person. And then, or I'll give you an example. I didn't receive love. I don't feel like I received love from this person. And then my next question, well, what does that look like? What does receiving love look like? What love? Then maybe I'll follow up with, what love would you like to receive? What would that look like if that person gave you that? And in many instances, they're not aware of what it would look like. And partly because they didn't receive something. So it's hard sometimes to conceptualize something you never got, or you feel like you didn't get. But then I encourage them to have a clear understanding of what your needs are. What do you want that to look like? So if that person did give it to you, you know you're receiving it. So we want to make sure we're clear, that we have clarity within ourselves before we have the expectation of getting it from someone else. So with your communication, if we're wanting someone to intentionally listen to us, we have to be as clear as possible with our expression. Communication also involves verbal and nonverbal messages. So we have to be mindful that when we are communicating, we can communicate with words and with just a verbal language, but there's also nonverbal messages that we give often. So think about body language as an example. And so ultimately, when we're communicating, if you were to walk into a room that I was in, and let's say I'm selling you a product and you want to buy it, but you walk into this room, let's pretend it's a store, and I'm sitting at the counter, the desk, whatever you want to call it, and I didn't speak yet, but you come in and my arms are crossed and my face is serious. And so my arms crossed represent I'm closed off. I may not be closed off, but what my body language, my nonverbal message is saying, then my facial expression, it may be communicating that. And that may not be what I want to. I may want you to buy my product, but I have to be aware of what my body is saying. My body may be saying, don't approach me, that I'm closed off. So we have to be mindful that I don't have to say, get out of here, don't buy anything from me, don't come up to me. But so verbally, I may not be articulating that, but what's my body saying? What's my face saying? So communication involves verbal and nonverbal messages. And so this is a really, really important question. And in the beginning, our first series that we talked about, we talked a lot about family first and foremost. And so ultimately, we have to understand when we're communicating, where did we learn to communicate? Like we have to look at the root of things. So when we look back at our family, we got to look at those patterns, those things that we learned, that we adapted. And so with communication, our parents, caregivers, whoever took care of us, whether it was a mom or a dad, whether it was grandma, grandpa, or you were raised by an aunt or uncle, but those people that you were raised by, those figures, they were your first teachers. That is where you first and foremost learned about how to communicate. You learn even from the stage of being a baby, because babies learn how to communicate. And think about it, they don't have the language yet. And so how do they communicate? They cry. And then as a parent, when you have a child, a baby, an infant, you learn to decipher which cry means what body language, what nonverbal message means what. So remember that word exchange. There is an exchange. It's a process. So immediately when a baby's born, a parent does not automatically go, that cry means I'm hungry, or that cry means sleepy. Through the process and the exchange, then there's communication. And so we are talking about relationship dynamics today, but we got to go to the root. We got to go to the root of things to understand everything. And so ultimately, parents, caregivers, first teachers. And we receive those verbal and nonverbal messages I'm talking about from our environment growing up. Like, so you paid attention to things. You may have been able to tell when mom was upset, dad was upset. What does that look like verbally and non-verbally? So you absorbed your environment. So someone may not have taught you when you need to communicate that you are upset, you should yell. No one sat you down and said that, but maybe that is what occurred in your environment. So we receive verbal and nonverbal. Or that when there is tension or when we are upset in our home, we're just not going to talk about anything. And so the communication didn't exist. And so we knew when it was quiet and no one was saying anything at the dinner table that something had occurred and maybe people were upset. And that was their way to articulate through that silence that they were not happy about something or upset about something, or there was some form of discord. So I want you to take a minute and which ways did your parents communicate non-verbally? And think about those things. I love giving examples. And I remember how important it was in my family. There was a lot of encouragement about privacy and not sharing certain things. I will remember being a young child who just needed to share with strangers what occurred in my household sometimes. And I would remember knowing that that wasn't a good move by the facial expression given to me by my mom. So I would ultimately know my verbal communication was not pleasing to my mom. And it's not because she said to me or turned to me and said, why did you say that to those people? Why did you tell our business? It would be because she would give me the look that when she communicated that look, that facial expression, I knew that she was not pleased with something that I said. Because I already knew the expectation was to not share family business. But I was a kid and like the boundaries. I didn't have a lot. so ultimately just thinking about that, right? We're going to the root, we're thinking back on like, where did I get some of these things from? And so we're looking at it from that standpoint. So those were nonverbal message, facial expressions in my home were those nonverbals to say the message that sometimes my mom wanted to relate to me. We also learned to communicate from anyone around us. So if you had a brother or sister, even I don't have down here cousins, which are other relatives, your friends, teachers at school, And the media, I told a story once about saying, I would always say, well, actually, and that's what I said when I taught in a classroom and I had second grade students. And I would say, well, actually, and I would say the student's name, we're not gonna like be going on the trip tomorrow. We're gonna go on Friday. And so I would say it, because I'm a very repetitive person. I have my things I say, my phrases. And I remember talking to a parent who didn't know I did that in a classroom, but talking to her and laughing with her about the student and some things that he said at home. And he would say, well, actually, mom, because he was in a classroom with me 6 to 7 hours a day. So like he knew the context of, well, actually, and was able to repeat it. So our communication verbally, non-verbally, we get from just our environment. Like we're in school all day. And then also the media teaches us how to communicate, those things on television, those shows, now social media, the news. We learn communication from what we see. So there are different types of communication styles I want to just kind of touch upon. We have first, I want to talk about passive communication. So passive communication is the avoidance of what you want to say because it makes others uncomfortable. So you're not really thinking about what you're needing and you're avoiding it, but then you're not really feeling good. So sometimes we choose to avoid something. We say, oh, you know what? You choose your battles. It's not worth saying. I'm good. And there's no emotional response to that. You just make a decision. But with passive communication, you avoid it specifically because it causes discomfort or someone else may not like it. But then you in turn, you feel a sense of powerlessness. Like you feel like it doesn't sit well with you. And I will give you an example, just of like feeling that people are doing things to you, or that you feel victimized because you can't articulate something. And so instead of stating your needs or what you need or what you want, you are silent in most cases. And that's how you communicate your message, by not saying anything at all. But then you don't get anything out of it in terms of like feeling better. There's no relief to that. You don't get to like communicate, articulate your needs. And so it's just avoidance, and it's because of others. And not in a others I care in a positive way, but just kind of that fear of what's going to happen if I say this. So that's passive. Then we have the aggressive style of communication, where someone speaks loudly, it's demanding. There is a form of intimidation. You're intimidating who you're talking to. There's blaming, criticizing. And in most cases, someone who's aggressive in communication, they're not really listening to who they're communicating with, because it's not about the person, it's about them. It's about them. And it's very, very intimidating. And it's very challenging when someone comes to the communication table with this style. Then we have assertive. And this is where we want to kind of be in line with being assertive. And it's just straightforward. And not, when I say straightforward, we want to be very careful. We want to be straightforward in a way that's not rude, it's not abrasive, it's not aggressive, what we just described. It's straightforward expression of your wants and your needs to others. And you can do this type of communication and still consider how others are impacted or the needs of others. So it doesn't mean, it's not selfish communication. It just says, this is how I need to just clearly state this, and I don't want to harm anyone. I'm not intending to be malicious. I'm not intending for this to have a negative impact. This is just what I want and need, and I just need to just tell you. And so assertive is what we want to go for. And not, I often hear an issue with couples too, is that maybe one person thinks it's assertive, but it's aggressive. when you are communicating in a way that's intimidating, and then you're saying, well, I'm just going to say what I got to say. When you have that mindset where I'm a straight shooter, that's not always straightforward. Because remember, with assertive communication, you are communicating your wants and needs, but you are mindful and respectful of others. So the I'm a straight shooter, I'm going to say what I got to say mentality, I don't know if that is the most effective way to look at things. Then we have this combination of passive and aggressive, which is passive aggressive communication. And so it's what appears on the surface is not. So what you see is not always what you get, and it doesn't match the person's feelings. The communicator feels powerless. It ends up making them build resentment. And then a passive aggressive communicator is most likely to communicate with their body language, right? Their body is saying something. So we've all done it. We're in relationship with people, and ultimately I always use the arms crossed off because it represents being closed off. And let's say, for example, you're experiencing something, you are upset with your partner about something they said or they did. And so you feel as though you're not going to say anything. And so now your body language, it doesn't really match what's going on. So you then become quiet because you're communicating with your body. So you're silent. You might have your arms closed off. You might isolate yourself. And then your partner says, who may not be aware of what they or how they offended you, may ask what's wrong and what might you say. Even though something's wrong, you feel it, you want to say it, you don't say it. And so they go, what's the matter? Like, you okay? And you say nothing, but everything says something's wrong. Passive aggressiveness. So because the body and the feelings don't match, you're saying something, but you're doing something different. Passive aggressive. Another example, I hone in on passive aggressiveness because it's very challenging, because I can, with someone who's a passive communicator, I can identify it. It's pretty straightforward. It's very easy to see. Someone who's aggressive, I can identify that and I can figure out how to work with that type of person. Someone who's assertive, I can identify it. Passive aggressiveness, I'm not sure what angle you're coming from, and it makes it more challenging. So I'm giving more examples of that. I can think of a time when I needed something. And so passive aggressive example again, let's say I remember when my children were small. And like I said, I'm an example giver to bring light to what we're talking about. And they were very small. And I felt like I needed support or more help with, let's say, cleaning up. And I remember walking into the kitchen, and I'm saying I remember because it's probably multiple times, walking into the kitchen and seeing dishes. And instead of articulating assertively that I need more help with cleaning the kitchen or whatever the chore was, I would walk into the kitchen and I would say, nobody, like, sighing, and like, I'm washing dishes. And then I'm going, nobody ever helps me wash dishes. And no one ever helps me. Nobody else. And I'm like, when I thought about it and reflected, I'm like, who's nobody? My children were toddlers. They can't help. My husband's the only adult in the house. So why not say, hey, do you think that you have some time this weekend, or when you get the chance, could you help me clean up the kitchen and assert what I needed? Because I like my home clean and I needed help. But instead, I'm doing the chore, but then I'm like saying something and I'm like not really directing it. So, but then I'm like, I'm acting like I'm okay. I'm not really communicating my needs. And so I'm being passive aggressive, right? So just making sure that we are communicating the right way. We talked earlier about it being, if we're wanting someone to listen to us, we have to clearly express ourselves. And in that situation, I was not clearly expressing myself. There was no clarity in that. I'm doing the dishes. Do I need help? Do I want to ask for help? Do I want to say nobody, but like who's nobody? When it's me and one other adult, so I could address that adult. So my communication, there's no clarity in it. And so being just familiar with these different styles: passive aggressive, assertive, passive aggressive. And so like how I said earlier, I would explain this. How is communication like a dance? So I'm not a dancer, but so I'm going to go through this a little bit from what I know about dancer and partner dancing, right? When we're dancing with someone, not when you're on a dance floor all by yourself, just getting down alone. It's a different story. So ultimately, when we effectively communicate what's happening, we are in lockstep with one another, right? So one step, think about a dance. Think about even if we just have not been involved in a partner dance, we're just seeing it on television, what it looks like. So when we communicate effectively, we are in lockstep, just like a dance. Each dancer, and I'm gonna like interchange dancer communicator, has a different skill and approach. So when you're in a partner dance, how someone dances, moves their body, their specific skill in dancing, different. Just like with singing, everyone has a different type of voice. That's why they're like sopranos, all altos, like they all come together to make this melodious sound, but they have different skills and an approach to the song. The same way with the dance. And so each dancer communicator just has a different skill, different approach to the dance, even though you two are doing the same dance. And that's how communication is. And the dancer, also known as a communicator in this, because we're going back and forth and being interchangeable, they respect the differences and know that the so the dancer. The dancer respects differences and knows that the end result is the goal. So you're aware when you're communicating, when you're dancing, that you're in partnership, right? Because you are understanding the way that you dance, the way that you may move may be different than mine, but the end result is this dance. Getting this dance done effectively is the goal. Coming together in harmony is the goal. Having this dance look good is the goal. And so dancers and communicators must think about when you're dancing with your partner, you have to make good eye contact. So I know you're listening to me because remember, going back with dancer, communicator. I know that you are listening to me because you're looking at me too. And it doesn't have to be the stare. You are looking at me. I don't know if anyone watches Dancing with the Stars. I catched it. I've caught it over the years. Not consistently, but enough to know that this is accurate. They're looking at each other, right? They're making good eye contact. Same thing with communication. They're present. They're in the right now. If I'm dancing, but I'm thinking about what I'm going to do later, what I might eat, is this thing almost over? Just all of these thoughts flooding my mind and not being kind of present in that moment with what I'm doing, how I'm moving, my partner, what they're doing, then the dance is not going to go well. It's the way with communication. I need to be present. As I'm looking at you and I'm communicating, I need to be in the moment of what's going on. I need to be in the moment. I don't need to be in my cell phone because I could put it down and I can always grab it back. If it's not an emergency on my phone, I don't need it. So I need to be in the right now. So communication is like a dance. right? Is that I respect the differences, understand you have a different approach, but the end game, the goal, the result, us coming together, doing this thing correctly, we're in partnership, we're in relationship with one another, and basically our relationship is bigger than anything, than like, whether or not you're right, I'm right, so just making that eye contact, being present, respect timing and space. So when you're a dancer, you have to make sure, think about when they get into their posture of getting ready to do the dance. They can't be too close or too far away. So they have to be at a very, very good space with one another. They have to respect the timing. How do we do that? So then if it is a forward 4 times, back 5 times, and I am not listening to the music so I can know the cue to do that, it doesn't go right. The dance doesn't go the right way. The same way with communication. I'm going to respect the timing. It is not always a good time to communicate. We don't always have the proper spacing when we're communicating. We got to make sure the space and the timing makes sense for our communication. And if those things are not intact, in sync, don't make sense for us when we're communicating, we need to change something. We need to understand. If I know I go communicate with my partner and I know it's not a good time, if my partner calls me on the phone and goes, I just had the worst day at work, it was terrible, my boss, and so on and so forth, and I am just tired and I just want to get home and eat, and then there's this thing that, and it's not an emergency, but I just feel like I need to talk about something, about something frivolous or something not that doesn't need attention at that day, and I still do it, I'm not respecting the timing for the communication. I have to be in tune in this dance of communication with the right timing and the right space, just like in a partner dance. So I have to make sure, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago, that I move to the rhythm, and this requires listening. If you move the wrong way because you didn't hear the beat, you're messing up the dance. So in communication with my partner, I have to make sure that I am paying attention and listening. So I know the timing of when to speak. Is this the right time? Communication is like a dance. There's an exchange. It's a process. There's a rhythm, and it requires listening. I need to hear the beat. When's my turn? When do I dip you back? When do I do that? Dancers, communicators, they practice dancing because they want to get it right. It's a practice. We're practicing communicating all of the time. It's a practice. We don't always have to communicate when we're upset and we got to get this out. It's a daily practice. So the dancers, they practice. So you are going to have with your, in a relationship with a partner, you're going to just have daily communication. It is, like I said, not always going to be this heavy conversation, but just ultimately, it's just day-to-day learning about one another and the practice. You say this, I'm listening. I say this, you're listening. We're doing that all of the time because we want to get this right. I want to understand better how you communicate. I want you to understand better how I communicate. So every day that we just have a conversation about a show, about something about the children, about work situations, about things that we like, what we want to, do, we are practicing our communication. We're practicing how to listen to each other. And during the dance, dancers don't storm off the dance floor. I have been in dances before, not a partner dance, where I forgot a step, and in my mind, I know someone who someone who dances will tell you, like, the audience doesn't know, they don't know, and so ultimately, even though having a step missed or thinking I practiced so much that I should just get this right, I don't storm off the stage, or I didn't. And so the dancer doesn't miss the step and then just storm up the stage, storm up the dance floor and go, forget it. So when we're communicating and it's not going the way that we like, or no one's agreeing with us, we're not going to storm out of the room. We are allowed to disengage. So when emotions are heightened and we're knowing that the exchange is not healthy and it's not productive, we can disengage, but we can let our partner know we're disengaging, or that it may just be a good time to like just kind of table this conversation and talk about it another day, and respect those boundaries, understand someone's boundaries when they're getting to this place where it's just you're not hearing each other, and that happens, but we don't storm off the dance floor. So we're practicing, we're listening to the rhythm, and we just don't need to storm off. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about listening, and I call listening the unsung hero. Listening is vital. We talk about communication, and we always we talk a lot about what we say, which is so important, absolutely. But listening is just so important, and it's just such a skill that we just don't even realize that, like, in our communication process is so helpful. And it just makes me think of a poem I learned a long time ago when I would teach this conversation about communication in a parenting class that I ran a few years ago. I would repeat this to the participants, and they would always want to write it down. And in fact, you can find it online. It's a nursery rhyme, and it's called Wise Old Owl. And I'll repeat it for you. And it connects to listening. There was a wise old owl who sat on an oak. The more he sat, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he learned. So why can't we be like that wise old bird? So just the whole idea, the wise old owl, he sat on that oak. The more he just sat and didn't speak, the more he sat, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he learned. So why can't we be like that wise old bird? So ultimately, listening being the unsung hero. Never encouraging giving someone the silent treatment, but just encouraging listening. We gain so much wisdom. We learn about people. We learn how to communicate. We learn about ourselves from listening to others. So this skill is so important, and it is just as important as talking, but it's sometimes just so difficult. It just feels so difficult to not just say something. And it provides the balance, the give and the take. You can't, in communication, always be the giver of the words. I'm going to say this. I need to say this. The listening is, I'm going to give to you my intention, my time, because what you're saying, I might not agree, but it's important because it's something that you have to say. So it provides balance. Listening, as I've been stating often so far, that it must be intentional. You have to set out with the intention to listen. So that means, like I said, eliminating distractions and paying attention. A good listener will always consider not only what the person is saying, what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. I'll repeat that. If I'm going to be a good listener with my partner, I am going to consider not only what the words I'm hearing are, what do the words possibly say about what they're feeling, and I do not want to diminish what their experience is. I cannot tell someone, don't feel that way, that your experience is not valid because it belongs to them. And remember that. Someone's experience, be it right or wrong, is theirs. So that's what they experience. It's not up to us to take it away. So as we're listening, remember that wise old owl. The more he sat, the less he spoke. You better believe when he was sitting on that oak, he was not just sitting there in silence, he was observing. Observing helps with communication, just paying attention, looking at something, observing, hearing. In the observation process, right? We're taking information in. And so if you're a good listener with your partner, or you want to be, consider what they say, what they might be feeling, and what they are experiencing. Good listening, we're not assuming and we're not judging. We don't need to be to finish someone's sentences. You don't get a prize for that. Allow that person to communicate it fully of what they're needing to say, and it's without judgment. In many instances with the communication, what happens is that we stop listening and we don't realize it. So someone says something to us, and then they have about 5 sentences to say, but we think we need to respond to sentence 2, but we really don't understand that we need to hear 3, 4, and 5 because it ties everything together. So if you're listening to someone and you already have your rebuttal and you didn't hear the rest, it's not the best listening approach. Because then you don't hear anything else they say, because you decided that in that second sentence, you needed to say X, Y, and Z. And so everything else they said was out the door. So we're not assuming we know what the rest of what they're going to say is. And if we're intentional, we're listening to everything without judgment. So the 2 types of listening I want to look at, because now we're talking about listening being the unsung hero, that difficult part of communication, but necessary. Quiet listening is the first one we're going to cover. And we talked earlier about with the dancing, making eye contact. Open body language, right? So quiet listening, we're making eye contact, open body language. We're paying attention, and we provide acceptance, and we want to try to understand. We're not always going to understand, we're going to try. So when I am practicing quiet listening, it really is literally what it's saying. I'm not saying anything. I'm literally looking at the person I'm talking to. My body language is open. I'm not like, closed off or looking like agitated or nervous about what they're saying, tapping and moving, and like my facial expression or my arms are crossed. I'm open. I'm paying attention, and I'm showing I'm paying attention by these actions, by the eye contact, and I'm intently listening. And I'm going to provide, I might nod my head, but I'm not speaking. I'm just listening. I'm taking it in, even though sometimes on the inside, I got to say something, but I'm quietly listening. And I want to try to understand. I might be struggling, but I want to understand. And sometimes people just need you to quietly listen. Then I have active listening. So it's a little bit different, because with active listening, I am going to say some things. I'm going to allow the person to speak, to communicate what their thoughts and feelings are. And then I'm going to attempt to summarize or paraphrase what they're saying. And that is showing that I'm listening, because I'm a part of the process in this communication game. And I want to know that when I'm summarizing what you said, I want to know I got it right. And I want you to know that I'm hearing you and I got what you said. Now, in this process, if you are summarizing or paraphrasing and the person's like, I didn't mean that, that gives that time for that clarification process to happen. So now I think I'm paraphrasing and I think you meant this. And you're like, no, that's not what I meant. And it gives them a chance to say it in a way that might be more clear for you. Because remember, in communication, We want to not only listen intentionally, we want to be clear with our expression. So ultimately, this is a great process with active listening. It doesn't mean we're jumping in every word, every other word. We're giving our partner, so we're talking about relationships. We're giving our partner the chance to speak, or the person we're in relationship with. And we're talking about, we may be talking about romantic relationships, but this is relationships. This applies to all types of relationships. And so also, when I am summarizing or paraphrasing to make sure that I got it right or what I heard was right, it's also a way where I'm reflecting. I'm also, as I'm repeating it, I'm going through a reflection process as I'm repeating what I thought I heard you say. And then we're going to check in about feelings. And so I want to know, based upon what you told me, I want to know how you feel. So now I paraphrased, and then now I want to check in to make sure I got right. Like, is this how you're feeling? When I don't call you when I'm going to be late, you know, are you feeling neglected? Are you feeling frustrated about, is that what you're saying from what you just told me, that like it frustrates you? You're just clarifying that. You just want to know how they're feeling based upon what you're perceiving, what you're hearing. So you're checking for their feelings because you want to show the person that you're in partnership, that you care about how they feel. You may not agree with that in your mind. You may say, I don't have to call. I don't have to call when I come home late, but your partner's articulating something to you. And so maybe you just want to like reflect on it, try to understand what they're experiencing. And we're going to ask non-confrontational, friendly questions. And this helps to explore further. And when I say non-confrontational, I mean, we don't want to go, well, why? Well, why do you need then? Right? That doesn't go well. And so it is a question, like I gave the example about so you're saying, so from what I'm hearing, you seem frustrated that I don't call you, or from what I'm hearing, when I don't call you, you feel neglected. And then we may want to explore more. So when I'm asking, like, what about that makes you feel neglected? And then maybe that person can explore more of what, causes that feeling, or what causes them to feel that way. So we're asking friendly questions, or non-confrontational, not why. We're asking that so that there could be some exploration. Maybe it'll uncover something else that will make more sense. And so just making sure that it's not a confrontational, I don't agree, so I'm ready to go at it response. And so verbal and nonverbal communication. And so with the verbal, be mindful of your words and how you say them. And so that means what words. So I know I often hear there's a saying that says it's not the what, it's the how. In some cases, it's the what and the how. What are you saying to someone you are in relationship with? What are your words? How do you say them? What is your tone? What's your tone and what's your intent? Because sometimes if we think about it and reflect, the intent's no bueno. It's not. And so with nonverbal, what is your body saying? What's your face saying? What is it saying in this situation? You got to be mindful of that. What is my body giving off? Even though I've decided I'm going to shut up and I'm not going to respond, I'm not going to say anything, but is my body saying something different? Is my body saying everything for me that I didn't say with my mouth that may not be positive? What are my facial expressions? And so because we're talking about communication and relationships, we're kind of like dig a little bit deeper into what that looks like. So communication, I want you to remember, is the connector. It connects us. It brings us together. Effective communication, because it's an exchange. Remember, we're exchanging a message to one another. It's a process. Relationships break down for many reasons, right? We can name so many. What are reasons people get divorced? We can name a lot of them. We could say it's finances or examples. We could say it is infidelity. There's so many different things, abuse. But in many cases, communication is at the core of those reasons. So we're having financial issues and we're not communicating about it. You feel a way about it and I feel a way about it, but we didn't talk to each other about it. Or it is I have a need that is not met and I am going to be passive aggressive in my behaviors, and instead of just communicating, this is what I need. So communication connects us in our relationships, and it's at the core of why relationships break down. We're needing to communicate effectively with one another. Poor communication, it means that conflict and misunderstandings remain unresolved. So when there are unresolved, I don't mean issues, as I said earlier, that you say, well, I'm choosing my battles. You know, that saying that we say, I don't need to, this is not, I don't need to address that you put your sneakers on the wrong side of the closet. Not a big deal. We don't need to go back and forth about it. It's not a big deal. I chose that. I don't need to say it. It doesn't impact me. Maybe it's just something I don't like. I'm okay. But when it's something a little bit deeper, or there's some type of conflict about something, or a misunderstanding, and we don't find some sort of resolve for it, it just keeps going. You know, it keeps things going. We're not communicating about it. It just keeps the conflict and misunderstandings unresolved. And then unresolved misunderstandings and conflicts can turn into anger, bitterness, resentment. Then poor communication can also mean that my issues pile on top of one another with my partner or the person I'm in a relationship with. So like if I don't communicate with you, one thing, you know, is the issue. And because we didn't talk about it, now the second thing happened and I'm just adding it and lumping it together. And I'm like, and then there's something else that happens and I'm connecting the dots and putting them all together because you don't do this. And then the other day you didn't do this, all because I have a need or I have a concern that I didn't share. And so now everything goes together and everything's an issue and they're piling on top of each other instead of just communicating and saying what my needs or my concerns are. And then ultimately intimacy is impacted. And when I talk about intimacy, I'm very rarely talking about sexual intimacy. I'm talking about like connection. I'm talking about outside of the bedroom, where we watch TV in the living room, the family room. If we're not communicating, we're not connected. And so it can spill into all areas. But if we are intimate with one another, we are connected. We feel in accord with each other. And if I'm not talking to you, you're not talking to me, I feel something, but I'm not saying something. There's something I don't like and it really impacts me and I don't say it, or I say it the wrong way, or I'm always saying it in a way where I'm being aggressive, or then our connection is not going to be what it can be. It impacts it. So a lot of times people think about it the other way around, about like physical intimacy, but we got to think about in all of these areas, how do we connect? How do we connect? How do we communicate? And then that connects with everything. That impacts everything. So, effective communication skills. What are those? So first, how do we communicate effectively in a relationship? Well, we communicate. You have to communicate. No communication is not good communication. Saying, well, I'm not going to say anything, you're not going to say anything, we just are quiet, we don't address anything, which a lot of times that's how people's homes were growing up. I hear that all of the time, that issues arise with families and then no one says anything, and major issues, and there's just silence. So no communication doesn't mean that it's good communication. So in order to be effective with communication, you have to be in the communication game. You have to be in it. Even if, remember, we said earlier with the dancing analogy, is that it's about practice. So even if ultimately I'm not doing it the best, I'm in the game and I'm learning and I'm going to try again. And I know that I said this and it wasn't the best thing to say, and maybe it was aggressive, but now I'm aware and I'm going to try to do better next time around. Then I use this with, when we talked about bullying with children, but this applies to everybody. Think before you speak. And you have the acronym there, THINK. So before I'm talking to my partner, someone that I am in relationship with that I care about, I'm going to think. So look at the THINK. Is what I'm going to say true? So is it true? Am I going to say you always, is that true? Before I come to you to the communication table and I say there's something that you always do this and you only did it twice and I've been with you for 20 years, I'm just throwing that out there, a number. Is that true? It's not true. It's not true. It may feel like that, but it's not true. Is what I'm saying helpful? Am I being critical? So when I'm communicating with you, what's my language? Is my language to you, is it going to help the situation? Is it going to put us in a deeper relationship? Because if I say I'm wanting to be in a relationship with you, the goal, like with the dance, we want the dance to be good, right? You want ultimately at the end of Dancing with the Stars, and they do their, tango, they want a 10 from the judges. They want us to call and go and vote for them. And so like, I have to think ultimately what the end goal is. The end goal for them at the Dancing with the Stars is they want to win. They want us to call and say, yes, vote them in. And if I'm wanting to be in relationship with you and have it to be a healthy relationship, I have to think about what's helpful. Do I need to say it this way? Do I need to say it period? Is there another way to do this? Then is it inspiring? Is my language going to make my partner want to do better or be better or communicate better? Is it going to, and we can't, let me rephrase that. We can't make anyone do anything. I'm a big proponent of saying your part is your part, their part is theirs. But am I speaking in a way that's inspiring? Does my partner am I inspiring them to want to be better, do better, communicate better? And lastly, is it kind? Is it kind? I know we might be upset, frustrated, every emotion possible, but like the kind part. And it doesn't mean I have to because you're allowed to be angry because you're going to be in a relationship and there's going to be conflict. So that is inevitable. So there is some sort of conflict in every relationship dynamic. So I don't have to go, hey, honey, like I don't have to be fuming and go, okay, baby, sugar, honey pie, whatever you call your partner. But like, I can still be kind and respectful. And so I want you to think before you speak in your partnership. That's a part of effective communication. Then I ultimately talked before about this using I statements. So I feel frustrated when you forget to call me on your way home from work because I get scared. I think something happened to you if I don't hear from you. I would like for you to just shoot me a quick call, quick text just before you drive to let me know you're on your way. I statements. And of course, in real life, it doesn't have to be so formal. We're not getting a piece of paper out before we talk to our partners and go, I feel when you, because that's not organic. It doesn't feel natural. So we always have to put our own spice on something, right? And make it work for us. But the ultimate goal for I statement is personal accountability of your feelings, of your expression. And so you're stating it's assertive communication because I'm just telling you how I feel. I'm not attacking you. I'm not saying you always forget to call me because the person just hears you always. They always do something wrong and they don't hear you. So Remember, we're being realistic here. And I statement is just for accountability of your feelings, of your expression, because your I statement is it belongs to me. This is what I feel. It's my experience. This is what I need. This is what I would like to see. That is a part of effective communication, not blaming, not criticizing, not judging. So to continue effective communication skills, we want to listen without interruption. We want to be self-aware. When I say self-aware, I think even though we're talking about being in relationship or partnership, when we have an awareness, we can do better. So we're going to ask ourselves about our communication style. I talked to you about passive, aggressive, assertive, and passive aggressive. So when I'm communicating, what often is my communication style? What is my body language? I want to reflect on intergenerational patterns and what did I learn about communicating and how does that play out in my life that I might not be aware of? And this is the other part. So I'm talking about self-awareness. So we do that reflection, but then as we're in partnership with someone, we want to be aware of self, but then the more that we are that wise old owl who sat on an oak, we want to be observant with them as well. When we're communicating, being observant is important. If I am someone who my communication style, because I learned it in my family, is aggressive and I get louder and maybe I'm intimidating. I may be great, nice, sweet all other times, but when I communicate, I'm aggressive and I'm not listening. But I want you to pay attention to your partner when you're that way. If you are aggressive in your communication and your goal is to possibly just, I'm right, I'm getting out what I got to say. If you pay attention to your partner and they're in a way shrinking or they're quiet or their body language changes and they look intimidated or scared, be mindful of what you might be triggering, what their triggers may be, because they're looking at you and you are kind of touching something and there's a trauma cue. And you cued that trauma because they were in a household growing up where someone aggressively communicated with them and there was fear there, or they were involved in abuse. So whatever, and I gave examples, it's not everyone's story, but just as you're self-aware of what you're doing, and if you're going to be in relationship, just be mindful of the experiences of your partner and how your style may be playing into something that's painful for them. And it wouldn't be about just because you're aggressive or you state what you have to say and they seem quiet. So you think, okay, they hurt me, I won. But you may be triggering something that is not healthy for them or the relationship. So I've been talking about this communication table. We want to seek to understand. I want to try my best to understand, because the goal is not for me to win or I'm going to say what I got to say. You better listen. Like, that's not the goal. If I'm in relationship, then the goal should be the relationship. It should be two healthy people in a relationship communicating effectively, because we want to be in relationship. And we scream, and if we argue or we sit in silence and we know we have something to say and not, what's the longevity of this relationship? It could be a long relationship, but is it a healthy one? We want to empathize, put yourself in your partner's shoes, try to understand where they're coming from and what it would feel like if it was you. Agreeing to disagree. Sometimes we're just not going to agree with each other. And talking louder doesn't make someone agree with you. Doesn't. Sometimes we get to a point when we're communicating that we need to take a break and possibly reapproach the situation, conversation, exchange later. Really looking at it. If you're talking about the same thing and you're circling and everyone's emotionally drained, because remember, you're watching for cues and clues. You're feeling emotionally drained. Like I said, circling, you've been talking about it. The time frame is just way too long. Because remember that dance idea, it's about respecting timing and space. Then maybe then it's time to someone say, we're gonna we are circling. We're not really getting to a place of understanding. I'm wanting to hear what you have to say. And maybe this is a good idea for us to go to bed and try again another time when we're not as tired and we're not as drained. Take a break. It doesn't mean that whatever topic doesn't need to be talked about and addressed. It just means that healthy, effective, positive communication is the goal. And if we're not approaching that after a certain amount of time, then maybe it's time to just take a break and move forward. So now let's do a little bit of reflection. Just kind of, we're talking about communication. And so let's do some reflection, because it's very, very important to look at where we are so we can do better. That's always the goal. So I want you to get your journals out, something to write with, and answer these questions. So today we talked about different communication styles. So I want to know, what is yours? And well, you need to know. It's not for me. I'm not going to read it. But what's your communication style? We talked about passive, assertive, aggressive, passive aggressive. So if you need to rewind back or look at what those are, what is your style? Because you may have never considered what that may be. Does your style change between two of them? But there's usually a go-to, and think about what that looks like. And in some situations, there's one style, because if we're talking about relationships, and even though we're talking about the relationship and the partnership, in a romantic relationship, relationships in general, good communication skills are important. So ultimately, you may have one type of style of communication when you're dealing with your mother. That's a relationship. And then your spouse, there may be a different type of way you communicate. So think about those things. And you may want to jot that down, what that looks like. So the next question is, what was communication like in your home growing up? So we talked a little bit about that earlier. What did it look like? Were there a lot of nonverbal messages? Which means people didn't talk, but you knew what was going on. You knew when the tension in the air was thick. You knew when mom was upset or when dad was upset, not because of anything they may have said, but maybe their actions, their body language, their facial expressions. So what was that like in your home? Because we can definitely, if we reflect on that, we can look at where we may, get some things from. And remember, when we are reflecting on the past, it is not for it to be debilitating, hold us back, make us feel as though we can't be empowered in our relationships. It's a reflection so that we can figure out, hey, what am I using? Maybe we communicated beautifully in my home growing up, and we shared, and people, our parents cared about how we felt, and they would ask us. And so maybe you look at that and you want to bring that along. Of course, you're going to take everything that you learn and you're going to adapt it for your own situation. So everything's not a negative thing. So if that was the case, write about that. What does that look like? How have you taken that and incorporated that style into your present day relationship or life? The third question is, what areas of communication do you think you do well? There's some areas where you might do a good job. I would say, for me, I am and it comes with the territory of my work, I'm a great listener. I'm a very good listener. And like I said, I think it's a skill that I have that has been cultivated through my work, but I'm very good at listening. So that is definitely something in communication that I can do well, the quiet as well as the active. Then the last part of this is, what areas of communication do you think you need to work on? So looking at it from the standpoint, in terms of communication, when I think what I need to work on in communication, I think just being able to clearly express. I think I am someone who likes parables. I like stories. I like for things to be practical, and I just need to make sure that I work on understanding that if I come up with a parable or some type of anecdote to go with something I'm explaining, it may make sense for me to take that story to connect it to what I'm talking about, but just being more mindful of the person on the receiving end and listening may not get it, and it may not be as clear cut. So just being more, having more clarity with that. But this is a reflection. It doesn't mean that this is a terrible thing. It just means that what can we work on? Notice the language. It doesn't mean what are you terrible at. It just says what can we work on. So just like understanding how we communicate. When we're self-aware, we can just do better in our partnership, in our relationship, and we can ward off those misunderstandings, and just kind of communicate in a way that grows and cultivates a healthy relationship dynamic. And the more you reflect on what you're doing, because when you're in a partnership, you have to do your part in the partnership. And you all have a part. You have a part and you do your part. So if you know you communicate a certain way and can do better, or you know how you communicate may intimidate your partner, if you know you're not the best communicator because you didn't learn and you're wanting to learn or even unlearn some things about communication, then we could do the work. Then do the work. And what I don't have listed, or I didn't have listed here, is if you are in partnership and relationship with someone and you are having communication struggles and you're trying and maybe you're not getting where you want to get, seek help. It's always my message. There are a lot of relationship counselors and therapists, couples therapists that are trained and skilled in different methods. There are so many different methods that may be effective for your relationship and that may work for you, that someone could just be the mediator, help you communicate, and then incorporate some of these things. So don't be afraid to get that support, because it doesn't mean that something's wrong with your relationship. Everyone just needs something. And so some type of support. And so there's nothing wrong with getting that if you're finding yourself, you and your partner circling around the same topics. I think it's more healthy to recognize that you need someone to step in than to just keep circling around and frustrating one another and not getting anywhere. So do that if you need to do so. So we are at the end of our conversation on the dance of communication. And I enjoyed talking about this topic. It's the connector of all relationships, communication. Don't forget that it connects us and binds us together. It's so important. So as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and be well. And I will see you soon.